what is logic? Now, logic is one of the most basic areas of philosophy. It's what all the rest of philosophy is built upon. Logic is the codification of language into a deductive system. Basically, we're taking kind of our flowy, flowery, non-specific English language and codifying it, quantifying it in something that looks like math. Logic is the bridge between English and math. Logic has two main parts: semantics, the meanings of symbols and logics, and syntax, the rules that those symbols follow. The purpose of semantics is to codify words and concepts in a language and put them into those shapes and symbols that make up the logical language. The purpose of the syntax and the rules and the grammar is to show which arguments are valid and which are not. Valid, of course, meaning the truth of the premise implies the truth of the conclusion. Now, there's a number of different kinds of logic. The most basic kind is known as first-order classical logic, also just first-order logic, classical logic, or elementary logic. It's what you'll start studying whenever you study logic. After first-order logic, you can kind of move up to what's known as second-order logic or higher logics. Contrasting with first-order logic, you have non-classical logic, generally people that deny some element of first-order classical logic. And somewhere in between first-order logic and non-classical logic, you have modal logics. In this video, very quickly, we're going to go through each of these categories and give you some resources for a couple of them if you're interested in learning more. So, first-order logic can be generally divided into two parts. You have categorical logic and propositional logic. Categorical logic looks like this. It comes all the way back from the ancient Greeks. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. You draw pictures with Venn diagrams and do things like that. It talks about the uses of terms in a language. That's what it uses. It is the application of predicates to objects. If you want more on categorical logic, I have a whole series. It's about a third of the 100 Days of Logic. Propositional logic, on the other hand, runs arguments like this. If it is raining, then it is cloudy. It is raining, therefore it is cloudy. Its arguments are kind of in this form. They build off of truth tables, and it uses full sentences of a language. It connects those sentences with operators like and, or, and implies. Propositional calculus is basically another name for first-order logic. It's the combination of categorical and propositional logic, also known as classical or first-order logic. All of these concepts are covered in a series I have known as the 100 Days of Logic. If you're interested in learning about any of these, check out that series. Now, modal logics, there's a number of different modal logics. We'll cover 4 here. You have alephic modal logic, which is the logic of possibility and necessity. This is the most common logic that people think of when they think of modal logic. But you also have other logics that fall into the same pattern, such as deontic logic, which is the logic of ethics and obligation. You have temporal logic, the logic of time, the past, and the future. And epistemic or doxastic or justification logic, which is the logic of knowledge, belief, and justification. If you're more interested in any of these logics, we have another series called the 3 Months of Modal Logics that cover all of these with a month for each of them. Now, second-order logic is a logic we don't have a series on yet, but while first-order logic quantified over objects or individuals, such as all baseballs are round, second-order logic quantifies over properties or sets of objects. So, for all sets of objects, or for all properties. For example, all sets with more than 3 members are sets that have more than 2 members. Second-order logic and higher-order logics are the building blocks of set theory. And hopefully, we'll get a series on them soon. We've already started touching a little bit on set theory, but we haven't gotten to it properly. Non-classical logics, on the other hand, are going to be logics which deny some element of classical logic, such as perhaps the law of the excluded middle. This leads to new types of logic known as non-classical logic, which will have different conclusions from our original logic. Some examples may include many-valued logic, intuitionistic logic, and paraconsistent logic. Once again, it's another topic that I hope to have a series on. If you have opinions on what my next big logic series should be on non-classical logic or second-order logics, please offer them in the comments.
Logic, fallacies, sounds dry as a textbook, but trust me, this stuff is crucial. We're talking about those sneaky errors in reasoning that can trip up even the smartest among us. Whether it's debating the merits of pineapple on pizza or dissecting complex political issues, understanding logical fallacies can help us navigate these discussions with more clarity and precision. So buckle up as we embark on this crash course, pun intended, in identifying and dismantling 10 common logical fallacies. By the end of this video, you'll be well equipped to spot these flawed arguments from a mile away and build your own arguments on a foundation of solid logic. Let's get started. All right, let's kick things off with a classic, the ad hominem fallacy. This one's all about attacking the person making the argument instead of actually addressing the argument itself.
Well, you're wearing mismatched socks, so your opinion on quantum physics must be wrong.
See, it doesn't matter if the person making the argument is a Nobel laureate or a high school dropout. The validity of their argument rests solely on the evidence and reasoning they present, not on their personality, appearance, or any other irrelevant characteristic. Think of it this way. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Just because someone has made mistakes in the past or holds different beliefs doesn't automatically invalidate their current argument. The ad hominem fallacy is often used as a smokescreen, a way to distract from the real issue at hand. So, next time you're in a debate and you find yourself tempted to launch into a personal attack, remember the ad hominem fallacy. Take a deep breath, refocus on the actual argument, and let's keep things civil, shall we? Next up, we have the straw man argument, and this one's a real straw burner, metaphorically speaking, of course. This fallacy involves misrepresenting or oversimplifying your opponent's argument to make it easier to attack.
Imagine this. You're arguing for stricter environmental regulations, and your opponent says so. You just want to shut down all factories and put everyone out of work.
That, my friends, is a classic straw man. They've taken your nuanced position and twisted it into something extreme and easily refutable. It's a dishonest tactic that avoids engaging with the actual complexities of the issue. The straw man fallacy often rears its ugly head in heated debates where emotions run high. So, how do we avoid falling into this trap? We need to listen carefully to our opponents and make a genuine effort to understand their perspective. Only then can we respond to their arguments fairly and accurately. Now let's talk about the appeal to authority, a fallacy that can be deceptively persuasive. This one involves claiming that something is true simply because an authority figure said so, without providing any actual evidence.
My doctor told me that aliens built the pyramids, and who am I to argue with a medical professional?
While we should trust doctors on medical matters, their expertise doesn't automatically make them experts on ancient civilizations or extraterrestrial architecture. The key here is to remember that even authority figures can be wrong, and their opinions should be evaluated based on evidence and reasoning, just like anyone else's. Blindly accepting something as true just because someone important said it is a recipe for misinformation. Experts can provide valuable insights, but it's crucial to critically examine their claims, consider their potential biases, and look for supporting evidence. Don't blindly accept their word as gospel.
Okay, let's unpack the false dichotomy, also known as black and white thinking. This fallacy limits our options to only two extremes, ignoring the vast spectrum of possibilities in between. It's like saying, you're either with us or against us, as if there's no room for neutrality, nuance, or independent thought. This kind of thinking can be incredibly limiting and prevent us from exploring alternative solutions or perspectives.
The false dichotomy often arises from oversimplification or a desire to control the narrative. To avoid falling prey to this fallacy, we need to embrace complexity and acknowledge that most issues are not black and white. There are often shades of grey, multiple perspectives, and a range of potential solutions to consider. Hold on tight, because we're about to slide down the slippery slope. This fallacy argues that a small action will inevitably lead to a chain of increasingly negative consequences without providing sufficient evidence to support this claim. It's like saying, if we allow students to chew gum in class, next they'll be vandalizing the walls and setting textbooks on fire. The slippery slope fallacy often relies on fear-mongering and exaggeration to make its point. To avoid this fallacy, we need to carefully analyze the argument and ask ourselves, is there a logical connection between the initial action and the predicted consequences? Get ready for a dizzying ride, because we're about to encounter circular reasoning. This fallacy occurs when the conclusion of an argument is assumed in the premise, creating a closed loop of logic that doesn't actually prove anything. It's like saying, this book is true because it says it's true. Well, that's not exactly a compelling argument, is it? It's like trying to use a dictionary to define a word by using that same word in the definition. Circular reasoning often pops up when people are trying to defend beliefs that they hold dear, even if those beliefs lack evidence. To break free from this circular trap, we need to look for arguments that provide evidence or reasoning that is independent of the conclusion itself. If the argument keeps circling back to the same unproven assumption, it's a sign that something's amiss. Hold your horses, because we're about to encounter the hasty generalization. This fallacy involves drawing a broad conclusion based on insufficient evidence, like judging an entire group of people based on a single interaction. It's like saying, I met a rude tourist from France, therefore all French people must be rude. This kind of thinking is not only illogical, but also perpetuates harmful stereotypes. The hasty generalization often stems from our natural tendency to look for patterns and make quick judgments. To avoid this fallacy, we need to be mindful of our own biases, seek out diverse perspectives, and base our conclusions on a representative sample size. Remember, just because something is true in one instance doesn't mean it's true in all instances. Fasten your seatbelts, because we're about to explore the treacherous terrain of post hoc ergo propter hoc, which translates to after this, therefore because of this. This fallacy assumes that because one event followed another, the first event must have caused the second event. It's like saying I wore my lucky socks and we won the game, therefore my socks must have caused us to win. While it's tempting to see correlations as causation, this kind of thinking can lead us down a path of superstition and false conclusions. The post hoc fallacy often arises from our desire to find meaning and order in a chaotic world. However, it's important to remember that correlation does not equal causation. Just because two events happen in close proximity doesn't mean one caused the other. To avoid this fallacy, we need to dig deeper and look for a plausible mechanism that explains how one event could have caused the other. Get ready to feel all the feels, because we're diving into the appeal to emotion. This fallacy manipulates emotions to win an argument rather than relying on logic or evidence.
It's like saying, if you don't agree with my plan, you obviously don't care about the well-being of puppies.
This kind of argument uses emotional blackmail instead of presenting a sound argument. The appeal to emotion often exploits our empathy, fear, or desire for belonging to sway our opinions. To avoid falling prey to this fallacy, we need to be aware of our own emotional triggers and be wary of arguments that rely heavily on emotional appeals. We need to ask ourselves, is this argument actually addressing the issue at hand, or is it simply trying to manipulate my emotions? Last but not least, let's hop on the bandwagon fallacy. This fallacy assumes that something must be true or good simply because it's popular. It's like saying, everyone's buying this new gadget, so it must be amazing. However, popularity doesn't equal quality or truth. Just because something is trending doesn't mean it's worth following. The bandwagon fallacy often plays on our desire to fit in and be part of the group. To avoid falling prey to this fallacy, we need to think critically about the information we're consuming and not simply follow the crowd. We need to ask ourselves, is there any evidence to support this claim, or am I simply being swayed by its popularity? And there you have it, folks. We've journeyed through the treacherous landscape of logical fallacies, armed with the knowledge to spot them from a mile away. Remember, critical thinking is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So, the next time you encounter a dubious argument, don't just let it slide. Channel your inner logician, break down the argument, and see if you can spot any of these fallacies lurking beneath the surface.
As a conclusion, logical fallacies are errors in reasoning that can make wrong arguments seem right. They are like mental traps that mislead our thinking. Examples include attacking a person instead of their argument, oversimplifying complex issues, or claiming something is true just because it is popular. By recognizing these mistakes, we can think more critically, spot weak arguments, make better decisions, and communicate more clearly. Understanding logical fallacies isn't about winning debates, but about seeking truth. It helps see through misleading statements and develop stronger, more rational thinking. Whether in personal conversation, work discussions, or public debates, being aware of these reasoning errors can help us make more intelligent choices and have more meaningful